JD Vance, thank you for this. We're on the road. You're in Phoenix.
Yep.
So where is the race? I mean, what is your sincere belief about how this plays out?
I mean, look, I think we're going to win. And I think we're going to win, I wouldn't say comfortably, but I don't think it's going to be the sort of thing where, 3 days later, we don't know the results of the election.
Yeah.
Who knows, of course. I've been wrong before. But, I mean, look, the basic fundamentals of the race are 65% of Americans, give or take, are unhappy with the direction of the country. They're unhappy with the foreign policy chaos. They're unhappy with the fact they can't afford groceries or housing. And they're unhappy just generally with the fact that Kamala Harris is, not a real person who's running for president. She clearly doesn't have her own ideas about how to advance the country forward. So I think that we're in a good spot. Now, there was, of course, the switcheroo from Biden to Harris. And even though a lot of Americans don't like Kamala Harris, she's younger and she's not as infirm as Joe Biden is. And so that sort of invigorated the Democratic base a little bit. And you see that sugar high in a little bit of the public polling. I mean, we're about 8 weeks to go before Election Day. And the public polls have shifted a little bit in their direction. But what we're seeing both when we talk to the Kamala Harris, like the journalists that are close to the Kamala Harris campaign. I mean, you know how this goes, right? You sort of give journalists some information. They give you some information. You yourself are a journalist, or at least you once were. And so our numbers, their numbers very clearly show that she's not doing very well in the states that she needs to win.
Yeah.
But a lot could change, and we have to get out the vote. And there, of course, are all of these ways in which Democrats have become very good at using both big tech, but also this sort of ballot harvesting operation to try to squeeze out as many votes as possible in particular areas. So we have to do that ourselves. And I think that we're a much better position to do it in 2024 than we were in 2020, though there's a lot of catching up to do. But on balance, man, when the country's not going in the right direction and people fondly remember the presidency of Donald Trump because take-home pay was going up, I think that puts us in a good position, but we still have to run our race. But, my prediction, 60-40, is that we have a relatively early night on Tuesday night. And I think the 40% is it's probably tight, but we still win.
And you think they'll accept that?
Well, it's a good question, right? I mean,
they'll be like, we call this race for Donald Trump. And it'll be like, he's the president. I didn't vote for him, but that's okay.
Well, I think that, look, there's only so much they can do, right? They've already switched out their candidate 6 weeks before their convention. They've already sort of marshaled the ballot harvesting operation, which of course is the story of 2020. It's not like, it's not ballot machines were hacked into. The story of 2020 is that they really, turned on this ballot harvesting machine, and they used, of course, big tech to silence stories that were negative about Joe Biden. They're certainly going to do that again. They're already seeing that, right? The technology sector is already fully in the tank. For Kamala Harris. They've obviously switched out their candidate. So all of the negative feelings that people had about Joe Biden don't necessarily get translated onto Kamala Harris. They have different negative feelings, but it is different. I think they're doing everything that they can to ensure that Donald Trump is an elected president again, but there is only so much they can do. And I think it's important, for those of us who think like you and I do, there's this big question, right, about what's actually going on with the people who run the country? Are they evil geniuses or are they incompetents? And the more that I get to know these people and the more that I sort of spend time around them, the more I think that they're much more incompetent than they are evil geniuses. And so that makes me think what they're doing, we can see. It's all out in the open. And we just have to push back against it as well as we can, but not assume that these people can I just don't see any evidence that these people are controlling the puppet strings and they're going to do everything that they can. They are going to do everything that they can, but it's not that much. So right now, I think Donald Trump's going to be the next president.
And if he gets elected president, once again, do you think they will accept that?
So that,
Are you concerned? And
so they've
spent the last 10 years, taking full control over the U.S. military.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm sorry to even talk like that, but they think that way, so it's worth saying it.
Yeah. So that's what worries me. So, right. So you hear all this talk about threats to democracy, right? And the biggest threat to democracy in this country is not like Donald Trump using legal maneuvers to challenge the 2020 election. The biggest threat to democracy is that the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. is fundamentally misaligned with at least half the country, right?
Yes.
So what I worry less about is are they going to let Trump win? Well, it's not going to be easy, but I actually do, sitting here right now, maybe I'm wrong, but I do feel very confident that Trump's going to be elected president, that he will be president. I think the real fight is going to be when he becomes president and he tries to do things, they're going to take him down and try to take him down in a very big way. And that's where the real fight is going to be. And I think it's going to look like a few different things. So number one, I really worry about the minute we start doing anything on the deportation front, like you have 25 million illegal aliens, you and I have talked about, I think it's the biggest threat to our country. You have got to get these people out of the country. You are going to have a reaction from the media, from the tech sector that's unlike anything that we've ever seen. It is fascism come to America. When we tell people who have come here illegally, you have to go back home, right? That is going to be a major focal point. I think the other thing that I really worry about, Tucker, is bond markets, right? Because the country's deeply in debt. Atlas, come here. Come here, buddy. Hey, come here. Come here. Sit. Lay down. You're okay. Just chill out. I know you don't have your bed here. He's used to a nice plush pillow here, and he's like, what the hell? None of my stuff is here. I know. Nice. He's a very good dog. So the thing I really worry about on bond markets is, okay, we have, call it $1.6 to $2 trillion in debt every single year in this country getting added to the national debt. And the only thing that really makes that serviceable is that interest rates are still pretty low, right? They're about 4.5%, right? Now, if interest rates go to 8%, and you're actually spending way more to service the debt than you are on actual like goods, services, and infrastructure for your country, like that can become a huge spiral that could take down the finances of this country. We've never had that in 200 plus years of being an American republic. We've never had a true debt spiral in this country. So I really worry about, do the bond markets, do the international investors, the people who are getting rich off of globalization, the people who have gotten rich from shipping our manufacturing base to China, the people who've gotten rich from a lot of wars, do they try to take down the Trump presidency by spiking bond rates? And one of the things that I think a lot about, and I talk to the president about this a lot, is when we think about who we're choosing as Treasury Secretary, one of the things the president, of course it's his choice ultimately, is we've got to find the guy who's going to make sure that we can manage this country through a real time of crisis where we get the country's finances back on track. That is one of the ways they could take down Donald Trump. And you have to ask yourself, the tools at their disposal, they're doing everything that they can to manipulate voters. I don't think it's going to work. But if Trump wins, it's not just going to be smooth sailing for 4 years. They're going to do everything that they can to take down his
presidency. So the key number is that interest rate.
I think that's probably the most important and the most impactful way they could try to take down his presidency is by spiking the interest rates. You saw this, by the way, Tucker, Liz Truss in Britain.
Yeah.
Okay. Which, by the way, like I like Liz Truss. I disagree with her on a lot of issues. But like, so I'm not trying to stand up or say Liz Truss is my person, but look, she came in, she had a plan, and the Bank of England, I think, made a lot of mistakes, maybe intentional. Interest rates shot through the roof, and it took down her government in a matter of days. Of course, we don't have the same style of government, but it would be devastating to the president if you had this bond market death spiral. And that's one of the things we're going to have to fight against when we win. And again, I think we're going to win.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think if you don't win, barring some dramatic unforeseen development, it'll be hard for people to believe you didn't win because who would vote for more of this? But how do you prevent your opponents from spiking those rates?
Well, I think one is you have to get, look, you have to have actual smart people in government. And this, it sounds so simple and it sounds so obvious. But one of the things that I think we have done wrong on the Republican side is, we don't like the government generally, right? There are things that we think the government should do, but we want the government to be smaller than the Democrats want the government to be. And so I think that actually creates a blind spot where the things the government does, you actually want them to be done very well. And you want them done by very smart people. And so I think you have to staff the Treasury Department with the right kind of people who can manage various fiscal problems. And then I also think that you have to be willing to actually pursue, whether you call it the Trump agenda, the America First agenda, you actually have to be willing to do this stuff, even when the media and even when, frankly, some Republicans howl and protest, right? So one thing the president has talked a lot about by the way, it's not just smart policy, it's also very smart politics, is you need to penalize companies that are shipping America's industrial base overseas, and you need to reward companies that are hiring and building in the United States of America, right? Well, one of the ways you do that is through tariffs. You say, if you're going to manufacture all your stuff in China, we're going to penalize you for trying to access American markets with goods that are made by slaves in China or some other country. Now, you do that, you both create more prosperity at home. You also raise some revenue from the companies that are just going to say, we're staying in China, your economic policy be damned. But that actually stabilizes in a lot of ways the fiscal situation in this country. You've also got to tackle some of the big spending items. I mean, we still have, let me give you a crazy statistic. So in 2019, total federal spending in this country was $4.5 trillion. In 2024, it will be north of $6.5 trillion. Okay, where's that $2 trillion difference come from, Tucker? Now, people will say, and I think they're being dishonest and they're being even malicious, they'll say, well, that's Social Security and Medicare. You have to fix Social Security and Medicare. Well, of that delta, man, of that difference, you're talking about maybe $100 billion additional per year on Social Security, maybe $100 billion in Medicare. So there's still $2 trillion that we're spending. And what happened in 2020? COVID. Right? COVID blew up the American federal debt and the American federal budget deficit. And we've got to get back to like some basic common sense and some basic sanity there. And I think if we do that, you have smart people managing the bond markets at Treasury and how we're auctioning off Treasury bonds. And you actually have a president, I know Trump is committed to this, who's committed to steering us through these very troubling financial times. Finally, you unleash America's energy markets because that drives down the cost of goods. You do all those things in tandem, and you actually get America on a much more sustainable fiscal situation. But that's a lot. And you have to have a very strong president, and you have to have Republicans who are willing to go along with it. And I think that we have that, Tucker, but it's not easy, right? This is the basic, we have to be good at government. Even though we want the government to be smaller than the Democrats, we have to be good at government. And I think President Trump is very committed to that. We're going to have to see how much we can bring our fellow Republicans along.
So two pretty easy, very popular ways to save money would be, one, no more subsidizing illegal immigration.
That's exactly right.
We're not going to pay people to break our laws. We're not going to pay them to rob liquor stores, or come into this country illegal. We're not going to give them free cell phones or free airplane tickets or housing vouchers. We're going to stop doing that. And the second is we're going to stop sending billions of dollars around the world to people who hate us, who, when it doesn't serve our interest.
Yeah.
Why can't we do those things?
Well, it's very important, right? So this is one of the reasons why I'm instinctively skeptical. And look, I want Social Security and Medicare to be financially sustainable for the long term. They're very important programs for our elderly Americans. But when people say the reason why we can't have reasonable spending policies is because of Social Security and Medicare, I'm like, whoa. That's a distraction. You're distracting from the reason that we actually have an out of control budgetary picture. That's why I just gave you the $6.5 versus $4.5 trillion number. What are we really spending money on that is unsustainable? It's wars, right? It's foreign conflicts. And you're right. It's hundreds of billions of dollars per year that we're spending on illegal aliens. Now, here's a crazy thing. I've been in the Senate for not even 2 years. When I ask people how much money, talk about healthcare for illegals, talk about Social Security fraud, talk about Medicare fraud, talk about housing vouchers, because even though illegal aliens aren't entitled to Section 8, there's fraud in the program, and also their children are entitled to Section 8. So, of course, that money flows to the illegal aliens. Add all this up, and then take probably 25, 30 million people who are here legally, and maybe that undercounts it. How much are we actually spending per year on illegal aliens in this country? No one in our government knows, okay? I've heard estimates that it's $100 billion a year. I've heard estimates that it's $600 billion a year. I've heard estimates that it's even higher. There are ways to estimate it, but we don't actually have good ways to track this stuff, because a lot of the money, Tucker, think about this. A lot of the money is spent at the local level, right? So if you're an illegal alien, you commit a crime and you're in a local jail cell, like, we're not really counting that money from or into the cost of having illegal aliens. But of course, if you're a municipality and you're spending $40,000 a year to house some criminal who should go back to where he came from, that's real money, right? Or let's take this example. Where do most illegal aliens get their health care?
Emergency rooms.
Emergency rooms, exactly right. So what is
Why you can't go to an emergency room now when your kid gets sick?
The wait time in emergency rooms has nearly doubled over the last few years because we have all these illegal aliens who are getting hospital services at emergency rooms. Well, obviously, they're not paying the bill when they get it. Who pays the bill? The American taxpayer. You add up all these costs, and I think it's hundreds of billions of dollars that we're spending on illegal aliens. And this is why I think it's ridiculous for people to say, well, we can't get America's fiscal picture under control unless we cut, Social Security from American citizens who have paid into it for 45 years. My response is, why don't we start with the wars, and why don't we start with not giving illegal aliens a ton of benefits and then see where our fiscal situation is after that?
We haven't done that. Those are wildly popular ideas. I can't imagine that they're below 65, 70% in the polls if you were to pose that question.
Probably higher, yeah.
Yeah, probably higher. But there's no sense that any of those things are going to happen because there's so much money behind keeping them in place.
Yeah.